Alright everyone, today I've got really good news. After years of mess, I've got to say Blizzard have actually done it. They've created basically the final form of the marksmanship hunter. You can basically be the Legolas spec, or Legolas with a gun spec, that you've always dreamed of. It feels really good. Also, a huge drama with these changes has actually been dodged because they've given the people what they want, and well, aimed shot now hits for over 1 million again. It feels great, and finally, the sense of rhythm is back. So let's get into the changes. If you weren't aware, the original plan involved no pets whatsoever for marksmanship. The good news is Blizzard have actually given in this one. You can use a pet again, but only if you want to, which basically should keep everybody happy. Blizzard originally scrapped pets entirely in favor of the new eagle that we get, but they heard people's feedback, they relented. Funnily enough, people like it when there's a pet there to tank for them. So here's the new design. It's the eagle. Everybody gets the eagle, and the eagle handles all of your utility. Then the way it works is there's a choice. You can basically nerf the damage of the eagle in return for getting call pet back. And the upshot of this is far better for gameplay. To use a pet or not use a pet is a choice that you make outside of combat, rather than the awkward situation where you'd summon in a pet, use its ability, and then dismiss the pet again, which was very clunky in combat. And when I say choice, I do actually mean it here. It's a real choice. Now, there may be a slight difference in damage, but you'll have access to your stun, bloodlust, and your pet bonuses no matter what via your eagle. The only real difference here is, do you want a pet to be there to tank for you? So essentially, everybody wins, especially because we also found something else out when we were playing it. This spec is just plain better now. So the best way to judge a rework like this is to play it in the PTR for a while and then go back to the live game and try to play the current version. And if going back does not spark joy and instead just makes you want to Alt F4, then Blizzard have done their job, and honestly they have done that here. After playing the new marksmanship hunter, the current one feels goddamn awful to play. So good job, and here's how it works. It's really all because of aimed shot. Now, if you've played marksmanship, you know how good true shot feels, right? You get a spree of buffed, lightning-fast aim shots that hit like a truck, but then it ends, and you just fall asleep with the rest of how that spec plays. It's slow, it's boring, ugh. Now, with the reworks changes, you basically spend less time stuck in place, more time moving, and even less time out of focus. It's very active, and they've managed to do that all without watering down how good your aim shots feel to cast. Now, to start off the changes, they have actually increased the base cast time of aim shot, but they've basically done that so they can then design a whole bunch of different ways to speed it up via gameplay. And of course, the big one is Streamline. Now, Streamline would of course speed up your aim shot cast after using a rapid fire, but Blizzard took that idea and they've expanded it into a full gameplay loop. So here's basically how it works, aided with a few talents to just make it feel amazing. Whenever you cast your rapid fire or explosive shot, you'll get Streamline. Streamline, when talented, will speed up your next aim shot cast by 30%. Now that aim shot will then give you, of course, a charge of precise shots. That will increase the damage of your arcane shot, your multi-shot, or your kill shot. But here's the really cool thing. Consuming the precise shot will give you a stack of Streamline. And what this does is it gives us a core rhythm to the spec, but it actually gets even better than that. And that's because Streamline stacks twice, which basically gives you a nearly instant and nearly free aim shot. And that means you're always in this 1-2 loop. But then every time rapid fire or explosive shot comes off cooldown, you add that into the cycle, injecting you with a second Streamline, which then gives you a hell of a fast aim shot. This basically just feels great, but what's cool is there's then a host of talents that support this and make it feel better. One example is this one, where if you land an aim shot after an explosive shot, it will cause the explosive shot to blow up early and for more damage, which is just a cool little thing, right? It's basically just a combo that you're lining up. Feels pretty good. True shot, by the way, also feels better. That's important. It's our main cooldown. So now True shot is a buff to Streamline. And the way it feels is basically amazing because you're keeping up the same loops, but you have got 0.3 second aim shot casts and loads more damage. It does feel amazing. So this is basically where almost all of the new fun comes from. What they've done is they've taken the core loop and they've just focused on that, and that only to make it as good as they can, rather than the last few years where Hunter was kind of just a whole bunch of stuff thrown into the blender, and you know, you'd play Hunter, you'd sort of taste the chunks and go, ugh, don't know why I went with a stew analogy, but there we go. Basically, they've they've taken some great ideas that they've just failed to implement well over years and years and years, and they finally got it right. And for sure, if you take this out for a spin on a training dummy, it's kind of boring, but, well, it's the PTR, there was heroic raid testing, so playing that, it actually hits the perfect spot. Watching your cooldowns, tracking where you are in the 1-2 loop, planning your movement, that is just enough focus without, of course, taking your eye off the boss for too long. So in single target, it's really as simple as that. You get the streamlined rhythm going, you react to your cooldowns and your procs. It's a little different than for AoE, but there are 1 or 2 annoyances to point out, so sometimes you'll run out of buttons because aim shot's cooldown is what it is, and that can just lead to a few steady shot casts thrown in that feel awkward. And by the way, the whole situation of casting your 2 steady shots to get the haste buff, don't worry, that's dead gone. You're not going to have to do that boring chore in the middle of your rotation anymore. But really, for core playability complaints, that's kind of it when you just have a few too many steady shots and you're broken out of the flow, but it's not really a massive problem at all. Okay, the next thing then is multi-target. So for AoE, you're still going to be using trick shots for every aim shot, but they have made that flow just a bit better. So with the new changes, pressing multi-shot to keep trick shots flowing is of course not an annoying thing because you're doing that anyway, you know, with how streamlined and all of that works. So that's pretty good. It's of course because it's consuming your precise shots, and it just means no more awkwardly running out of focus between your different casts because just firing off the multi-shot would cost so much. It means no overcapping during true shot because the aim shot cooldown is faster, then you can get your trick shots back, and just loads of little rotational things that now feel smoother. Plus, volley has actually got salvo baked in for some really big explosive shot combos, and in AoE, you're keeping the same like 1-2 or 1-1-2 loop, but it's slightly adapted to multi-shot instead. Now, of course, you'll still want to trick shot for every rapid fire as well, so it's not exactly the same, but basically, it's a damn smooth flow and it's pretty fun. And honestly, it's hard to overstate just how much better this spec flows with the upgrades. Again, previously, rather than the mess of just abilities that you could throw in with your talents that were fighting, right? Fighting with each other and a billion different effects to track, this is just a nice, simple flowchart where you can get into the rhythm of it, you can get into a bit of flow and enjoy the combat of Warcraft, which is not just pressing buttons, right? It's actually engaging with the fights, looking around the room. This works with that real well. Now, if I had one major complaint here, I think it's that we need a proper indicator for our streamline stacks. That's because sometimes during like particularly squeaky mechanics, you can forget if you've built 1 or 2 stacks. People will obviously make a weak aura for that, which will solve the problem, but honestly, if Blizzard just had some sort of tracking for that, this really would be a spec that is just so clean that you can completely play it without weak auras. But okay, I do have another complaint, and that is that the eagle's raw. There's something odd about this video, and that's that I haven't really mentioned the new spotting eagle much. And that's bizarre because this eagle is the linchpin of the new marksmanship hunter fantasy that Blizzard are shooting for, and what it does is it increases your damage via Spotter's Mark, which is a debuff that it applies on the target. And sure, whenever that application happens and you can actually see it because your camera happens to be pointed at it, sure, looks pretty cool. But it basically means nothing otherwise. The way it works is it's applied by precise shots and it buffs your aim shot damage. And look, really big chunky aim shots, those are cool, that's fun, and you can talent this to give you a bit of haste as well. But other than that, it is entirely passive. And I'm not really sure how I would fix this because the spec honestly feels really complete. If they added loads of eagle-related things, it might actually take away from what's working here. But I suppose it's strange that this eagle is supposed to be such a large part of the MM fantasy, but it doesn't really add much to the spec. It's there to be augmented by talents, but you could basically kind of not notice it. But big picture though, marksmanship does play so great that this thing with the eagle is a minor complaint. It's just a little bit odd, that's all. Especially because you're probably looking at your weak auras or maybe the feet of the boss, which means you're just not going to notice the eagle, which kind of blows. So maybe we should have some big eagle cry announcing a proc. Maybe change lock and load so that popping Spotter's Mark procs it instead of auto attacks and reduce the frequency. I don't know, something. Anything to make people fall in love with the new eagle that we're getting instead of barely noticing it. Because if they did the eagle right, then maybe, we could collect new, different eagles for our hunter, and that could be a fun thing for hunters to do. But as it stands, yeah, it's raw, it needs more time in the oven. Now, there is another problem, an elephant in the room, just that it's not one elephant, it's 2. Hero talents. They're a bit weird this time. So Dark Ranger and Sentinel are the marksmanship hunter hero talent trees, and without them, MM does actually play fantastic, and its fantasy overall does make sense. But then, to the new MM Hunter fantasy, you either throw in Edgelord Sylvanas cosplayer or some Loon Goody Two-Shoes elf, right? Like, between the two hero talent trees. They're both quite prescriptive in their overall, like, vibes and fantasy, to the point where they don't necessarily fit what MM is right now. And look, this had already been a concern that MM is essentially one of the worst classes for just being shoehorned into a fantasy that may not make sense for your character, or, you know, the RPG part of World of Warcraft. And I guess it's a little bit of a pity that there's no way to fully embody either like the full sniper archetype with all of the cool like mechanical guns that are in-game, or the more classic Legolas bow thing. It just feels like they could probably cook something up that just fits MM way better. I mean, look, what is there? Those are great options if they work for you, but I think the marksmanship won't be perfect until it gets hero talents that fit its new fantasy a bit more closely. But besides all that, right? If you're like me, an MM Hunter who has been very disappointed by how it's been since Legion, it's time to listen up and give it a shot for patch 11.1. This seriously is good. You might be surprised just how much more you enjoy it, because it looks and it plays a hell of a lot better than it does right now. And speaking of the game looking and playing better, check out this. It's on the new UI and just new things that they're doing, which honestly, they do make this feel less like an old game.